It's not my problem. It's not my problem. When I feel heavy metal, and I'm pissed and I'm needle. When I lie and I'm missing all of the time, but I'm never sure why I need you. Please don't miss out.
All right, welcome to the Prospect Podcast. Coach Schumann here with Coach D. We're on the bottom today, Coach.
Oh, that
Yeah.
works.
Last time we were on the top. I
Whatever,
must have clicked something different. I don't know. All these different
whatever StreamYards, whatever world we're living in their world.
I think when Steve Cully goes in here, sometimes he moves around the different things. So sometimes I forget which one is the one we used last time. So
That or he thinks it's one way and it definitely isn't.
I know there are ones that he uses. There are ones he uses, and I'm trying to remember which ones he uses and which ones we use. So, welcome to the Prospect Podcast. We have a fantastic guest today, Coach Jamie Bolton. We're going to talk football as we probably do about, I would say, 75% of the time. And we're going to dive into multiple topics. Our second favorite topic, probably, which is speed, strength, and conditioning, that kind of that realm. So we're going to dive in both of those today, which is really, really great. Coach Bolton is with Rock Hill High School on that South Carolina, Charlotte border area over there. But he's in South Carolina. He's been coached for 16 years. Before being at Rock Hill, he was an OC and QB's coach at Kings Mountain. He was a head coach at Cannon School in Concord, North Carolina, where he was coach of the year. And he's got a podcast with our guest from the other day that we had on. So we're excited to Dustin. Yes. Derek, you that's why I have you, because you got to chime in all those things, because it's like
That's what I do.
Exactly. That's what you do. So keeping it all straight.
Well, shout out to Coach Martin, because he must have said something positive about us.
He did.
We got Coach Jamie from it, because shit, it could have went one way or the other, man. And I mean, hell, we had him on for a while. Like
he said it went like 90 minutes.
Yeah, we were like, oh shit, man! Like we just got rolling with it, and we were going. So
yeah, he's a talker too, so that's good.
We probably could have gone 2 hours easy.
Easily.
No doubt. And coach is also, he's got expertise in the strength and conditioning realm. That's one of his big roles as well with Rock Hill within the athletic department. So he's got a lot of hats, and he fulfills a lot of roles. And that's part of being a high school coach, I guess, as well, right? If you want to get paid full time, you got to do a lot of things.
Yeah, if you want the more roles you have, usually they pay a little bit more. So,
and the more valuable you are, right? The more valuable.
You got to stack it, though, right?
Adding
it just matters. It matters.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
You increase value. That's a key component. So it's great to have you on the podcast and talk to you further. If you could just kind of dive in, fill in the blanks and what I missed, and we could really go from there and start to dive into everything.
Yeah, I mean, you covered it. I think for me, kind of this whole coaching journey for the last, 16, maybe even more than that. I even started coaching when I was in college. I went to a small Division II college and played baseball in North Carolina, Belmont Abbey. Shout out to the Crusaders. Played baseball there for 4 years, and kind of got into coaching baseball and football at York. Was kind of my big South Carolina school. But before that, I was in North Carolina for 4 years. Had to move, 2.5 hours from home. I was staying in a house with the baseball coach, the AD, the strength coach, and there was a school called Red Springs High School. So shout out to them. That was back when the recession hit. And so nobody in town was hiring, teachers. And so moved out there for a couple years, and came back home and just started to try to find, a place to coach. And good thing for me is, I grew up with my dad being a football coach. He was a defense coordinator for a long time in this area, in the Gaston County area, which is right outside of Charlotte. And so kind of grew up on the sidelines. I grew up in the dugout watching him, coach baseball. And so for me, that's what I always wanted to do. was to be a high school coach. And so I did both baseball and football. And then, a few years into it, I was like, I got to pick one. I got 2 kids now. One's 8 and one's 3. And so with how, time consuming the coaching profession can be, I just kind of stuck with one. And that's been working out really well.
I think that's that's always a tough thing, when you have children, you figure out what you can put the time into.
Yeah.
And that's it's good that you're able to figure that stuff out, because sometimes guys get caught up and they can't, and then they maybe they regret it, right? So kudos to you, you making those things a priority. So talk, you wearing a lot of different hats, and let's dive a little bit into first the your career starting in college. Like, what made you know that you wanted to be? You said your father coach. You
Mhm.
wanted to be a coach. Kind of what made you want to dive into that world?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, watching my dad interact with young men, especially in football and baseball, and watching how he impacted those guys. Like I remember going to restaurants years later, and his former players coming up to him and saying, "Hey, coach," and just giving him a hug. And my dad was probably one of the hardest coaches to play for in a lot of ways, because he was so demanding, and even his tone at times was harsh. And this is kind of old school, and I was raised like that too. And
Right.
and so just watching the impact, and I knew that I love sports. Everybody gets to the point where I'm not going to be a professional athlete, and unless unless you're a guy. And so I was like, well, if I want to stay around the game for the rest of my life, I'm going to have to coach. And I really dove into that, and I took I think for me, understanding kind of where my talent was. I wasn't the smartest kid in school, but I think I have good enough social skills to kind of get along with people. I kind of know how to motivate people. And then, not being a great athlete myself, although as a college athlete, not being an athlete that was just purely gifted, I felt like I had to do a lot of things from a fundamental standpoint to have an opportunity to compete at that level, if that makes sense. So I felt like all those things kind of culminating into, all right, I love the game. I think I know how to teach it because I had to learn how to do this. And then from there, just really kind of learning how to lead a program. And that's probably the hardest thing. But I think from a career standpoint, just knowing, what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, I was very blessed in the fact that I felt like I was called at an early age, even through in high school, of what I really wanted to do. I idolized my head coaches, and just being around the game. It meant a lot to me. And I think I want to bring that same mentality to the programs that I've been at, to impact kids. And I think that's kind of the core of what I do.
It's
Yeah,
crazy, right, Dave?
yeah.
Because it's a trend that recently we've
Yeah, we
seen
found
with
the
coaches. I mean, it's becoming more and more into the limelight where, guys realize at an earlier age, whether it be coming out of high school or whether it be while in college, that, coaching is a direction that they want to pursue, and they just run with it. And, there's no longer that, okay, I'll get into it when I'm done playing, or recently a lot of guys like yourself, coach, we've seen guys play other sports in college and then go the football route, right?
Mhm.
We literally just had a coach on yesterday that did some of that, and he's a Division III guy right now,
Yeah.
interim head coach. And like we talk to these guys, and a lot of it, I think Dave can allude to it as well, because we've touched on it a bunch, is the opportunities that coaching now presents in terms of it really is a career path. Whereas a lot of it really wasn't looked at that way. It was more of a hobby or something you did on top of teaching, right? Or some of that. But it's so interesting to see.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
in the
agree.
last couple of weeks, it's been
Yeah,
crazy.
and I think in our area, in the Carolinas, I've coached in North Carolina and South Carolina, and I've been back and forth a couple times too. I graduated high school in the early 2000s, 2006, and so it wasn't really a career thing that you're
No.
seeing now. And it's like, okay, you had a head coach, you had a couple assistant coaches, and it was important in the early 2000s, late 90s. But now we've seen where in South Carolina, in particular, they're paying coaches so much more money, and teachers so much more money than North Carolina. So now you're seeing kind of
A jump.
And that's because it's important to win now in South
Yeah.
Carolina, and coaches are having to. I mean, it's getting to the point where
It's awesome.
it's very, very good in some ways, but then we're starting to see where some of that that competitive nature is starting to bleed out and into some some cutthroat kind of things going on.
Yeah,
of course.
it's interesting
starting
too,
to
right? We in the Northeast, like it's always. Teachers have always been paid very well, right? Within the country, the national scale of it, the Northeast, when you're talking, New Jersey, New York, right? Like Connecticut, like there's some of the highest paid teachers in the country. It just is what it is. But at the same time, like when you compare coaching stipends, right, or coaching salaries, like you wear a lot of hats. And Coach Shu has been a head coach numerous times, but the teachers, that's where you always made your money. And that's the coaching was like, again, a hobby type of thing. And they just threw you whatever, or they try to make it worth your while. Then, you get a weight room stipend but in comparison to a Texas, right, or a California, or even a Georgia, where coaching's your job, teaching may be something that you have to fulfill a commitment of. You have 2 classes a day type thing.
Correct.
And one of them's football. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it certainly is district dependent. There's some districts
absolutely.
that are, and it depends on your role too. If you're a position coach in some, realms, and you're a social studies teacher, I've been there where I'm a position coach. I teach a state tested subject. Well, you're going to be, the administration is going to be on you about being a really good teacher. And I think that's where you want to coach. And you want to coach at places that love both.
Absolutely.
You don't want to just coach for a place that doesn't. And every stop that I've had, I felt like I was always in alignment with that, being a teacher and a coach, because we want that for our student athletes too. And that's not just, coach speak. That's like the truth. I think when you have those districts and, schools that align like that, you probably have the best programs in the state. It's a place where you want to go, you want to call home, you want to bring your kids to, and that kind of thing. And so I think they kind of go hand in hand, but you're starting to see it more and more in South Carolina. A lot of these head coaches are paid on admin scales, and so they don't even teach a class now.
It's
and
amazing.
So, yeah, it's great. And it's getting to the point where they need that. You don't have time when you're dealing with recruiting and helping your kids get recruited. You're, you got all these functions and events as a head coach has to do. You got youth outreach. And you guys know this. I mean, but it's a full-time job just being a head football coach. You got to manage a staff of 20. You got 9th grade team, you got a JV team, you got a varsity team, and so it really is an admin role. And some guys are even the athletic director and head coach, which is insane to me. So to be able to juggle all that.
Well, those are some of the difficult roles there. Talk about what you do from an offensive coordinator standpoint. Like, what are some of the things that you kind of focus on from a philosophy standpoint over at Rock?
Yeah. So my offensive journey, I was a backup quarterback in a triple option offense.
Oh shit.
Yeah. And so I played receiver. I was like our backup quarterback. And so I learned triple option.
Bashed in all the time.
Yes, man. Thankfully, I didn't have to take that beating like all the time. But we had a really good quarterback. And even if we didn't have a really good quarterback, I still would probably been the backup. But he was a really good player and tough kid. And he ran the crap out of that thing. But it was good to learn that offense because you kind of learn it from the inside out. You learn the box first. So I can remember our coaches, hey, man, we're going to run midline to a 3. We're going to run veer to the shade 5. We're going to run outside veer to the 3-5, and you can pull a pitch off of him. So all those things that kind of set my foundation from a box standpoint, but then my dad being a defensive coordinator and helping him chart film, on the VHS where you got the tracking button, you're trying to help him figure out what the techniques are and all this. And so just watching film with dad, being a quarterback in a triple option offense, really kind of set me up from a X and O's IQ standpoint to kind of move forward. And then I eventually learned the air raid under a head coach and really offense coordinator, Joe Salas here in the Carolinas. He was with Hal Mummy back in Valdosta State when Hal Mummy was there. And then before Hal Mummy left to Kentucky, the year before, my mentor, Joe Salas, he left and took a head job in North Carolina. And so I was able to link up with him at Red Springs. He taught me the bare bones air raid system. And then I kind of took that all the way through my career into 2016, 17. We learned from a guy named Brent Dearman, which is the head football coach at North Alabama. He taught us Gus Malzahn's system. And so we've kind of merged those two now. So Gus Malzahn, if our listeners don't know, kind of a multiple offense based out of 11 personnel. That's what most teams are running now. You got power, counter, buck sweep, but then you have a married pass game, and it's a really good system. And so we learned that with, they get all the RPOs built in with all the gap scheme and zone scheme runs. And so we kind of taken those two with the air raid pass game plus the Gus Malzahn run game system and really developed our own offense. So now if we were going to kind of categorize what we do, we're adaptable in the sense that we can run multiple run schemes, both zone and gap. But we also have a robust pass game based in air raid principles with an R4 framework. So R4 is a
R4
system.
passing game.
So Dub Maddox.
It's really good.
We know them. Him personally. We are actually business partners with R4. But I didn't know Dub when we first started learning it. And I'll tell you that one thing has kind of changed my whole outlook on how to see the game of football from basically a football 101 standpoint. So what I've been able to do with that framework in mind is being able to develop my own system as long as I stay within those guardrails of R4. And that's really helped me as a football coach year to year be able to adapt, our talent. So some years we'll have a running quarterback, some years we'll have a pocket passer, some years we'll have 4 really good receivers. Some years we'll have small linemen. And every year we've been able to manufacture. And then those years that we have everything in place, we've won championships. And so that's just kind of giving me a lot of confidence in being able to adapt to our personnel, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. That's an interesting marrying of 3 worlds there from a coach standpoint. What was some of the things that were challenges in adapting it? Because obviously there's some overlap, different philosophies, especially within the run game. So like Gus Malzahn's run game is pin and pull, wing tee based philosophy. And, I'm guessing air raid is probably more zone based run scheme.
Yeah, I think
I'm familiar with R4, but talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think when you look at the systems like Gus Malzahn's run game, and Gus, when they installed it with us, they install inside zone first. So inside zone is more of a vertical game for him. He wants to. It's not necessarily we're going to take our zone steps and climb. It is like we want to find 2 double teams if we can and push vertically. And then he installs gap schemes. So you're looking at your power, your counter, your GT, and then we go to buck, which is your pin and pull. And that's kind of where he lives. And with that, they have built-in play action passes, which is another thing that from an air raid standpoint, you're not going to see a whole lot of heavy play action. And so what we try to do with Gus's pass game when it was installed with us through Brent Dearman it was kind of and I think most offenses are kind of set like this. You have a 2 high beater on one side and a 1 high beater on the other side. And then with our air raid background, it was more pure progression based, I guess you would say, which is we're going to be going through a 5-man progression with the overlay of we need to find where the best grass is to maybe help us determine or help us accelerate pre-snap where the ball might go, if that makes sense. Those things were conflicting with me. And I think the air raid stuff is great because the concepts work and typically somebody's going to be open because you have 5 out. But what we weren't able to mesh very well is that tight end or an H-back into the air raid system. And so when we started to kind of run into those headaches of, okay, we have to get the H out and run a particular route that may be deeper than what an H-back could do, well, then we have to flex them out. Well, now we can't run our gap scheme the way we want to. So we had a lot of those issues. What R4 did is R4 said, okay, here's what a passing progression should look like for every pass concept because it's built on a timeline. And so, and this is, again, shout out to Dub Maddox for this system, but basically there's a rhythm route, a read route, and a rush route. And that rhythm route's got to come out in a certain time. Then the read route comes out in a certain time. And then a rush route is really any time. It could be a hot, it could be the third in the progression. So what that did for us is it said, okay, once we install these or build in these air raid concepts, like let's say Y cross, for instance, here's the R4 way to go through a progression. And then we can kind of build in who runs the particular routes based on our personnel. And so that was really the big hurdle that we had to have. And now we just feel like it's seamless. So it's been really good for us.
When you went to the R4 system, Coach, how did your players react? Like specifically, obviously, your quarterbacks and wideouts, because I have a buddy here in state that has he's preached it to me since the summer of when he went to it, how much it simplified, just taking some of that read stuff off of especially a younger QB, to just make it as simple as what the R4 system kind of does. How did your players react to it when you kind of worked with them and installed it?
Yeah, I think right now,
especially being a quarterback yourself.
Right. I think right now, the biggest thing is when you install an offense, you're not really talking about like at Rock Hill. So I got there last year and I didn't say, hey, we're an R4 team. This is just how we do offense. But I will speak to when we transitioned from air raid to the R4 kind of passing progression platform, it actually cleared a lot of things up. It made sense. It made sense to like speak the same language. So if you ask someone what is open, Coach Schumann would have a different answer than you, Coach D, or maybe it'd be the same answer, but it might use a different language. And so what the R4 did initially was to solidify the language used between the coach and the player and all the receivers. So now we're all on the same page of like what is open. And then now I can trust the kid, say, hey, man, what did you see there? I didn't say like, hey, man, why did you throw a pick? I could just say, what did you see? And if he can't tell me in that language, then I know that he's not doing the proper progression platform, or his eyes are in the wrong location, that kind of thing. So from that standpoint, I think initially it gave them a lot of confidence. And what I saw was a huge progression for the player that doesn't intuit the field naturally. So you'll have some quarterbacks you go out there, and we had one at Cannon. I didn't have to talk R4 to him. He understood as long as I go through this progression that coach sets for me, I'm going to dial it up because he can intuit the field as good as anybody I've ever seen. And so you don't want to overcoach that. But we've also had quarterbacks in our systems where, a kid gets hurt and he's really good and you got a backup, and the backup can operate at a proficient level because of what we built in for him and the way that we go through practice. So it's really been great for the really elite quarterbacks. But what it's really great for is kind of that younger or average quarterback to make them play at a higher level than what they could otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's an
interesting system. It's cool. It's cool, especially when you're talking about reads and progressions and those types of things, right? Where for a high school, to ask a high school kid, especially in the air raid, right, to go from here to here to here, you know what I mean, and just with all that chaos coming into it, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. Whereas now, like this system, it's like, hey, you look, if it ain't there, like it's just, it's really in stone type of progressions.
And what it allows you to do now is once you understand the timeline and the footwork with the quarterback and when routes break open and that kind of thing, what it allows you to do now is develop your own passing game. So now, as long as it kind of fits within a mold. And I like this too, because coaches will have suggestions on the weekends. Hey, coach, what if we run this? Well, as long as it checks these boxes, I'm willing to maybe do it. I'm willing to say, okay, is there a rhythm route? Is there a read route? Is there a rush route? Well, how does it marry with our pass protection? How does it, fit the quarterback scan model that we like to use? And I think when you have those parameters, and now it gives you the ability to maybe jump outside of what a air raid concept is, if it fits your players and quarterback or something for the game. And I just think it's a great system. We love it. We love it so much that, we partner with them and, we help Dub out a lot, but man, it's been a tremendous resource for us. And I can't say enough about it.
I think sometimes, Coach, what gets lost in the sauce is what it does for receivers, right? What it does for them knowing, hey, I'm the rhythm route, or hey, I'm running the rhythm route. I got this. It allows those guys to kind of just get in the right framework of, all right, well, this is where the ball is supposed to be, and why is it not here? And what it just
Yeah,
allows them the whole, you know what I mean?
right.
Like the bigger
Prime
picture.
example. Yeah, prime example is okay. And the R4 is not just the progression platform, man. That's kind of the tip of the iceberg. It goes
Right.
into all kinds of game planning and how to watch film with your players and all this. It talks about how to teach your players what like all the coverages are, the fronts are, and that way, if a receiver and the quarterback are on the same page and it's cover zero, we always know the defense can bring one more than we can block and cover zero. Well, who's the rhythm route? Okay, well, that receiver's got to know, like, I got to get open in this window of time because the quarterback's looking for it at that point. He's got to throw it on rhythm or he's going to get, sacked or hit or something like that. So it's beautifully built for that. And what it does is it's not a new, like, it's not inventing the game of football. What it's doing is it's consolidating language and builds a platform to where you can teach your players and coaches, the game through that lens, if that makes sense. And it's really, really good. I think coaches that have been coaching for 40 years or 30 years, they already know a lot of these things. But what it does, it helps the young coach kind of have a platform to teach from.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Get your staff on the same page. It allows you to get everybody moving in the same direction. Get the coaches on the same page, especially the young coaches. That's always gives them a system they can draw on to be able to coach there. Do you teach that system? Are you guys no huddle? Are you guys huddle?
That's a great question. Yeah, so tempo for us, it depends year to year, but typically we have multiple tempos that we go into. I believe this year going in, we're going to be pretty athletic, and I feel like if we get a lot of touches for our athletes, that gives us more of an opportunity to score, and because we'll have some really good athletes on the outside. We have a really smart quarterback. We have a really explosive running back, and we get them all coming back. I think this year our plan is to go fast and try to be one of the fastest teams to try to get as many plays as we can. Now, there's been years before where in York, Comprehensive, it's in South Carolina, in 2018, we had a bunch of huge hog mollies up front. We were big up front. We had a couple decent receivers, a good running back, so we wanted to control the game. And so our tempo was much different. It was no huddle check, but we could huddle and kind of sugar huddle, which is, huddle close to the ball, break out quick, but you can kind of control the clock a little bit. And it just depends. So we've been slow at times. We've been really fast at times. And then this past year, we were kind of a muddle huddle to where we could communicate with our young offensive line and make sure that those guys were really on the same page. But what we have is a system to where we can put our guys in a tempo throughout the game at any time and run our entire offense out of a super fast no huddle tempo. And then we had the opportunity to, get in a true huddle anytime. So for us, having the ability to adapt within the game or within a season or season to season is really important. But like this year, we're going to go super fast just because that lends itself to our athletes. But if we want to control the game and run the ball and do things, and maybe it's because, the defense isn't, where it needs to be, and we want to limit the other team's possessions, or maybe it's the other team's offense is really, really good. We want to limit possessions. We need to slow the game down. I think you got to be able to do both, especially in high school in the area that we coach in at the 5A level. You're going to have the ability to adapt.
Is 5A the largest? South Carolina, how's it broken down?
Yeah, so 5A is the largest. We're one of the largest schools. I would say we're probably top 15 or 20 in terms of size. And then, so 5A is the highest classification, yes.
So you're talking how many kids in the building?
We got over 2,000, but
Okay.
Some schools have 2,800, 3,000 students. So there's in South Carolina, there's a lot of rural areas.
Yes,
So,
yes. Which a lot of people don't realize. They think it's, like, especially being from up here, they think it's Myrtle Beach or bust. Like, that's kind of what it is.
No,
like,
the I-85 corridor, so I-85, and then you got 95, so you got, like, your pockets. So we're in York County, which is right outside of Charlotte. That's got, Northwestern just won the state championship there. They're a smaller 5A. 5A was 2 divisions last year. So they were the small 5A winners. South Point High School is the 4A state champ in our same town. So Rock Hill had 2 state champions in the same town. That's not unheard of. They've done that before.
Yeah.
Then you keep going south down 85, and you got, Burns, Dorman,
Burns. That's an
Gaffney,
infamous one. Yeah.
And then Dutch Fork is kind of in the middle of the state, but they won the big 5A. So now there's one 5A classification. So Northwestern will be up with us. So we play in the the most, I would say the most competitive. And 4A is really good too. I mean, they're all good, but yeah, we play in the highest class.
Right, but when you're talking size, it's a little different,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
it's the
it's
same.
over 2,000. Yep.
Yeah, it's the same. In Jersey, there's 5 groups, and then private schools play in their own playoffs, and then public schools,
Yes.
play in theirs. And it's
Mhm.
Group 1 is the smallest, Group 5 is the biggest. There's a lot of Jersey's really small, but there's a lot of people. Like
Yeah, it's dense, very dense.
It's extremely dense. We're both originally from North Jersey, where the private schools are really kind of the powers, your national powerhouses. Your Don Bosco Preps, your Bergen Catholics, like St. Joe's Montville, like these are schools that kind of run the national, on the national scene more
Mhm.
so. And then as you get into South Jersey, which is more, we're in Central Jersey now, which is, look, it's really good football across the board, but the private schools there's not as many, and that kind of factors away a little bit. It's more regional schools, where you have a lot of towns that go to one high school, where up north it's even more compact, where it's one town, one team, and the smaller school, there's more of them. Whereas down south, you're talking, because we kind of, if you're below where we are, if you're south of where we are, Atlantic City, more of like your outside Philly area, like that's, it's outside Philly, but it's still Jersey, so,
Right.
but it's regional schools where there's a lot of, it's big, like they're bigger schools, right? So
Right.
your Group 4s, your Group 5s, and there's not so much of that private school hammer that kind of gets down on it, down there so much. But it's the same type of classifications when we're talking pretty much size wise, in terms of Group 5s being 2,000 or bigger and whatnot. But they're all operating under the same type of, I mean, up until a couple years ago, we had like 30 something state championships. Like there was
Wow.
30 something state champs, because every section, every group had like four champs, in terms of like sections and what it was. And now we play down to a true group champ, which ultimately is like 14 games. And up here, weather plays a factor, right?
Oh,
So
I'm sure. Yeah.
you're playing that state championship game in that first week of December, and it's way,
Yeah, brutal.
I mean?
Yeah.
I
We
mean,
think it's cold down here in South Carolina. I can't imagine what it's like there up there.
and they do, but and
So-
we've had this conversation with some guys, outside. Like they do a good job of the state championships, or they're either played at MetLife Stadium where the
Oh, yeah,
Giants
yeah.
and the Jets play, or they play it at Rutgers, right?
That's cool.
But look, even it's cool for the kids and whatnot. But I'll tell you, as a coach, like I dislike it a shit ton, because look, you're trying to put a high school game in a 70,000 seat stadium.
Yeah.
You even put 10,000 people in there, and it just feels empty.
It doesn't feel the same. Yeah.
No, not at all. But it's different. But it's a great experience for the kids. They love it. You know what I mean? But it's just different when you're talking some of that stuff, and whatnot. To circle back, with the team you have coming back, how do you handle off season? What are you really looking to solidify in that aspect? What are some of your staples in your off season program? Roster wise, do you have multi-sport guys? Is that a thing for you guys? Because we deal with it up here in the Northeast. We push it, right? Like we push it a ton, because the weather, like you could do football year round, but what can you really do football year round up here? There's no spring ball in Jersey. So you literally cut your kids loose at the end of the season, and it's, hey, you get a couple, weight room is not something that's mandatory. Football class is not something that a lot of high schools even go with or whatnot. So, it's just different in the structure of it. So how does it work for you guys?
Yeah, up here, or down here, in South Carolina especially, they've done a really good job at a lot of these bigger schools of getting all the kids in a class. So like 98% or 99% of our football team is in our first block class. So that's we do 4 blocks. And so I'm the strength coach there. So right now, literally in December, so we were out after the second round. And so we've been lifting ever since. And it is a huge part of really every program in South Carolina that's really good. And even some that are kind of, so it's a full off season. Like we are in there. It is, everybody wears the same thing in the weight room. Our coach does a really good job. Like
I know that's something so small, but I just love that uniformity, man. That's so cool.
It's a big thing. So if you walked in, we have, they transitioned our weight room from an auxiliary gym. So we have 16 racks You have the hole wide open, in the middle. And so we rotate, everybody takes a knee, they rotate fast in between stations. Like it is just like in season. So right out of season, it's really, really important for us. We live 4 days a week. We sprint and do kind of football stuff that fifth day. Sometimes that's leadership. Sometimes that's football 101. We've had a lot of snow here in the last couple of weeks. So, we've kind of had these short weeks. But anyway, it is full tilt. This is the most important time for us in the year. And so we hit it hard. And so they've hired strength coaches at all these schools that only do strength. And that's for all the sports, but I'm in there.
And that's their full-time job? Like they full-time strength and
So for
conditioning
me,
coach?
I'm a full-time strength conditioning coach, and I'm a PE teacher.
I was gonna
All my classes are in the weight room. So we'll have, a football and basketball typically share a class because we'll have some crossover. So the basketball, it's a really good model because in the fall, that goes from football to basketball in that same semester. So then the kids that are in football class they just kind of transition over to basketball class. And so they are able to lift and practice and do things during the day. And then the same thing in second semester, those basketball kids will finish up, and then we'll go right into football for the spring ball. So all season for us, January through April, obviously that's lifting only. We have a few weeks in there we can get outside with the kids after school, but a lot of that stuff we'll take care of in class. And that is a heavy emphasis on, for us, hypertrophy and then strength. And then once we get to May, June, and July, we have spring football. So we have a whole month of spring football where we go full pads and tackle and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's so cool in itself.
It's good. It's good for our kids' development. I think states need to think about that model from a developmental standpoint. So when a kid leaves our place, they're obviously going to be really, really strong. They're going to be, highly skilled players because they have that extra training, and they'll be tougher. And so I think, I just think, South Carolina's got a really good model with that.
Leading into that, as far as your philosophy, as far as what you do with strength and speed, and kind of what are you what does that off season look like? What's your kind of philosophy? The reason why we always ask this is because we've had almost every Feed the Cats guy on, and so when we have coaches on for strength conditioning and speed, we like to see, what they use, what they don't use, what their philosophy is, those kind of things.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys that I've learned from over the years. So Mark Hoover, so going back to your days, yeah. So Mark's he actually was really instrumental in me getting my head job at Cannon. And so we worked together at York. And so me and Mark were in the weight room together. So I was able to learn a lot from him. If you guys don't know Mark Hoover, go check his stuff out. He's actually moved back into the Carolinas. So that's awesome. He was down in Florida for a while.
Yeah, we had talked to him when he was in Florida.
Yeah. So he's been great. And then my time at Cannon, I was able to meet and work with Sean Powell. He's a strength coach at Cannon. He had a couple other assistant coaches there. Kyle Jackson, he's at Charlotte Christian now. And then Travis Webb, he's up in Perkins in Ohio. And just learning from a lot of those guys, and even doing the podcast. Like we've had a lot of guests on, but I think what's helped me is having the ability to look at strength conditioning through a sport coach's lens. And I think there's always some sort of battle between, a strength coach and maybe the sport coach, because the sport coach may not be as knowledgeable as those strength coaches in their field, but they do want to see certain things. But I think, again, speaking that same language has been huge for me. So going through, the USA weightlifting stuff, I got the high school strength coaches association, certification. And I think just learning from all those other coaches, being able to speak that language has really helped me be both a sport coach and a strength coach for all sports. And so now I can kind of relate on the same level as a sport coach. But our programming is 365. So that's what, all of our, programs have had in the past. And so I've picked up on that. And one thing that I really believe in is kind of this triphasic model. And I'm sure you guys have talked about in your program, but basically right now we're in our hypertrophy phase. So we want to be able to get bigger as much as we can, the furthest away from the in season athlete. So this will cycle through, and different, sports seasons are in a different cycle right now. So right now we're in the winter sports. So that's your basketball, in wrestling, they're in their, kind of phase 4 maintenance phase. But they're fixing to get right into their hypertrophy phase as they end their season and go into the off season. Right now in football, we're a fall sport, so we are in our hypertrophy phase. That'll go all the way through March. And so right now, where our rep scheme is, high volume, and that's going to be kind of that light or moderate intensity. So right now we're working at that 75%, but we're working at 8 to 12 reps on certain core lifts. And so we carry that all the way through April. And then once we get into April, we're in our strength phase. And our strength phase, we're obviously going to lower the volume and up the intensity. And that's when we're going to take those 12 weeks to really, really try to get our athletes strong. And so we love the hypertrophy phase first because, one, we can reteach technique without a lot of weight on the bar, and we can make sure proper depth on squat. We can make sure that our clean technique is good that way, and we're kind of building those muscles up. They're going to be super sore early on. And then once we get into strength phase, now we're really trying to go for that absolute strength. And then once we get into the summer, we're working in power and speed. So that velocity-based training comes in. With all of that, we have incorporated in power and speed to all of our phases, but the priority is hypertrophy, then strength, then power and speed as we kind of do that preseason prep over the summer. We also do a lot of plyometrics and maintenance in those sessions as well. So our sessions, now I know I'm kind of rambling a little bit here, but our sessions are based like this, and I think this makes us a bit unique.
Well, you have a full block, correct?
Correct. So we have a 90-minute block.
90 minutes.
Yep.
Look, like that's a great amount of time, as long as you're obviously structured within it.
Yeah.
And there's just something to be said about that first block of the day. Those guys, like, they get there and it's all right, here's what we're doing. It just kind of sets the tone. They're still, kind of foggy from getting there. So it's like, hey man, like, this is what's going to get you going. Look, it's just such a, rather than the whole, okay, after school bell rings, like you just went through your whole school day. Now you got to cut, oh, I got to go to the weight room, like that type of, to know, hey, like, coach is the strength coach. Like just, I think that in itself, and Dave and I have been at places where they've had one of those, like a full-time guy teaches a couple classes, but he's the strength and conditioning guy. And, obviously us as football coaches being involved in that aspect of it, right? Like you have those conversations of alignment and whatnot, but for you, you're on the staff, right? So your vertical alignment with your head coach and what you guys want to get across, it's all the same path and it's the same direction. And these are the standards. And I think that now allows the other programs, the other sports in the building to get on board with that as well. And it's not a, oh, well, it's basketball season, you're not doing football workouts. Like, well, yeah, I am, like, or we're in with the strength coach, right? Like, it just adds, I think, to the greater of the group, the school itself, school athletics, right? It's because everybody's aligned in that. It's not this coach is doing this, his approach is this, it's all aligned. And that's difficult, I think, a lot of times in a high school when you have, a guy that's he's the basketball coach, but what does he know about the strength and conditioning aspect of other than what he just researched or somebody's told him or what he always did? I think that's
a great point. I think, one of the hardest things is, because I'm associated with football and heavily in there, I think making those inroads to other sports, make sure I'm taking care of those other sports has been, something that I've been really intentional about, because that could be kind of a weird thing if, one sport coach,
a deterrent.
You correct. And so, but now I think this, I've been there a year, not quite a full year, but, going through a semester and then making sure that I'm taking care of other sports. Because at the end of the day, the communication to that sport coach, we want to make your athletes explosive. We want to make them fast. We want to make them strong. And we want to prevent injury. Well, when you can kind of convey that to the sport coach, and then we also don't have a soft program, like we are going to coach your kid hard. We're going to be held to a really high standard. The coaches will fall in line, and they want you to take it over.
And one of those things too that's very difficult is, like, when you're talking not having a strength and conditioning coach, right? Whoever the coach is responsible for that weight room, whoever gets that fall, spring, winter stipend to be the person in charge in there, for the most part, it's most times the football coach, right? So
Correct.
that deters athletes from other sports going in there a lot of times because, hey, there's 60 football guys in here and, I'm on the field hockey team. I don't want to go in there and do all that kind of stuff. So, and I think that's one of the, like where I'm at now, this is year 3 that we're kind of in there. I think we've done a tremendous job with making that a comfortable atmosphere for all teams.
Yes.
Invest that are willing to invest in it. Right now, some coaches are still kind of like, that's not what we do or whatever. Okay. But to me, that's an issue in itself. That's a you problem, right? Because we're creating an environment where we want everybody to come in and we want to interact with you. And hey, if your coach doesn't have a program for you, we'll put one together for you to kind of help you with it. I mean, shit, I started coaching girls flag last year and I got girls flag girls that are in there and coach, what program can we do for us? Right. And it's like, all right, you're willing to put in the work and you want to come in here and get better. Like that's going to help you in your field hockey season or your basketball season. Right. So the good of the group, but that environment can be very intimidating for a high school athlete who's never really maybe done weights or any of that type of stuff to have it, like I said, somebody who's, in there and knowledgeable across the board and not just the football coach or, another male dominated sport. I think adds a level of comfort where they want to go in the weight room and they want to get better, but they're intimidated by just what that atmosphere is. And I think having it part of school is like, now you have to go.
There's a grade attached.
It's your friggin' like whether you're passing or not, it goes into whether you come to class. All right. Cause that's part of it, which Dave and I have talked endlessly about the decline of physical education class and just overall fitness of just the common high school student that can't do a push-up, can't jump rope. Like they get in there and they walk circles around the gym for 90 minutes or, just that overall health, I think, and involvement in any type of physical activity, right? I mean, this isn't the early 2000s where we're doing the physical fitness test and going in time in the mile, right? Like gym class looks very different nowadays. I think that overall school focus on fitness matters and plays a big role.
I agree. Yeah. And I think we've seen that. And good thing, shout out to our school district. We have
administrations. Yeah.
Non-athletes take my class. So we'll have like football block. We'll have kind of 2, what we call total body wellness classes. And so that could be a mixture of, they couldn't get into their sport specific class and we may have a student in there that doesn't play any sport. And sometimes we'll have special needs students in there. And so it's just really, really good that and we don't want them going straight to PE unless they just really want to do that. But I'd rather have them in the weight room and really start to work on their physical, and they like it. They start seeing a body change and start to meet their goals. And it's like, well,
so big.
And now they can I tell them all the time, hey man, if you come in here and listen to what we're saying, when you go to Planet Fitness, you won't look like somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. So
when they see those small little body changes and you just see the confidence of themselves, to get it.
And it's also a recruiting tool for us. Now we might see a kid that hasn't been playing sports because they weren't super confident. They weren't, maybe they were out of shape and now they're in shape and they're confident.
What sport do you play, buddy? I don't play a sport. You do now.
You play football now.
You play now. Yes, you do. Like, here's a t-shirt.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a big deal. From the athletic standpoint, where do you see, like for football in particular, the important areas that have to get developed? Are you a big speed guy? Are you a big strength guy? Are you both? Do you believe in conditioning athletes? What are your thoughts from that standpoint?
Yeah, that's a lot.
You running gassers? Are you doing 61-10s? Are you crushing guys at the end of practice?
There's a lot of science, right? And I'm sure you guys have had like Mark on, and there's a lot of science, and I believe in a lot of the data that's out there with different things. I think there's multiple ways to get where you want. Now we're at a place right now where we have a lot of natural speed on our team. And so for us, I know, and I've been to places where that has not been a
problem to have, right, Dave?
Yeah, that's the best problem to have, right?
Can run fast.
Exactly. Everybody can run fast. And, but I've also been at places where speed was an emphasis, because we lacked a lot of team speed. And so I think you have to have a program that has that in mind. I don't think you can go in there with a cookie cutter program for everything. And so where we're at now, we have some linemen that need to do a lot of development in the strength aspect. It's not really a size thing. It's a strength aspect. And a lot of linemen, in my experience, lack a lot of upper body strength when they're young. And it takes them a lot of time to build up that upper body strength. So that's something that we've identified with our particular athletes. I think the more you can narrow it down and have a program that can adapt to your athletes, the better. And we do that. Linemen, we're not running a bunch of gassers with linemen. We're just not. We want to keep their weight on. We don't want to do a whole lot of conditioning with them. We want to make sure that we can get to max velocity a couple times for those guys. But honestly, speed for a lineman is not super necessary. When are they running a 40-yard dash, in a game? Now, our receivers, we want to keep them topped out. And we have our speed work is kind of built in throughout the entire season. And so right when we get into that end part of strength phase, into that power and speed kind of velocity phase of our work, that would be like May through July and August. Man, we are really trying to hit our top speed a lot during the week. But right now we're not in that phase. But I do believe in speed training. I think you just have to phase it throughout and really emphasize it. Now, if we had a really slow team, I'd probably do speed training now to try to work as much of that as we can.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So so because you have those groups, so do you not touch it? Do you so if you feel like you have a fast team, what are you allowing their to explain what that looks like? So
So like our programming for speed for like throughout the year is like right now our emphasis is we are probably not a strong team. So
right.
just talking with our coach, looking at our numbers, I want to be able to maximize the I don't know, 80 days or whatever it is that we have them in class. And so we have to prioritize certain things. Like right now, we're in our hypertrophy phase. I'm not touching speed right now. I'm not touching velocity. Now we'll hit it in certain things that we do, like from a warm-up standpoint. Every day we have some sort of speed training. So like in our warm-ups, we do a lot of, it's like a 10-minute or 15-minute warm-up. So we will work and develop the technique for speed. We may hit max velocity once a week right now. So we'll go outside, we'll hit a max 40. And we're not really training them to be faster, but we are keeping their muscles conditioned to the point. But we want to make sure all of our time investment in the hypertrophy phase is on getting those muscles bigger for the majority of our players, if not all of our players right now. As we get into strength, now we're going to up our max velocity days to 2 times per week. We'll be on what we call a 3x2. So it'll be 3 days of in weight room training, 2 days of speed work. Really, one of those days is pure speed. The other days is change of direction. And then when we get into our summer months, we'll start to incorporate more volume in the speed training, if that makes sense. So we kind of prioritize that as we go through. Now, I think if we had a team that was really, really slow, I think the phasing would be different. We might be on a 3x2 right now, meaning we have 3 days of training and then 2 days of speed work.
Right.
But that's just kind of where I'm saying, like, you have to adapt. So yes, we are touching it. But we are not prioritizing that in this particular phase, if that makes sense. And so our speed training,
Are you? No, go ahead. I'm not trying. I wasn't.
No, I was just saying, like our speed training. Actually, we have another coach that helps me out with that, with their technique. He's like a former track coach. He's actually a football coach as well, and so he does a lot of speed training work for me from a technical standpoint. But it's up to me to kind of program. Okay, how many sprints are we getting in this month? What does that look like? Same thing will change the direction. But right now in the hypertrophy phase, I try to liken it to our other things. Like we need to reteach how we're doing a lot of these movements, from like power clean, bench press, front squat, back squat. And
that was going to be my question. Are you
same thing with running? The same thing with we need to go back and reteach a lot of these things in a hypertrophy phase, because now we have the time to do it. And once we get into our next phase, now we're hoping that all of our stuff is kind of tightened up. From core lifts and our ability to run efficiently and proficiently.
And are you on the Olympic lift team? Like, are you focused on those like core 4? You know what I mean?
Hybrid.
Like your bench, your squat, your deadlifts, your
so
your
the power, right? So like power, your power lifts are going to be like your bench press, squat, deads. Olympic is going to be what you got: clean, snatch, and then jerk and all that. So what we do is we do back squat, bench press, power clean or clean, and push jerk. So we'll just do a push jerk.
Nice.
And so we kind of have a hybrid system. I like overhead stuff. I got this from Kyle Jaksic. He said his philosophy is he wants to build heat-seeking missiles in football. And so I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, coach, I want to build up their upper body for armor. So I want to be really kind of a high volume, big chest, big shoulders, right? But then I want to build power from the waist down. And so that's kind of what we're doing. So I'll probably always be a little bit higher volume with their upper body, but I'm going to be lower volume, higher intensity with their lower body, and then really focus on velocity-based training as we get into that with their lower body. I don't really care about velocity-based training with bench press, for instance. I think you work that in, but that's not a priority for us. Like I want to be able to have those feet hitting, and I want to be able to have heat-seeking missiles where they have a bunch of armor up top. And I think that's kind of where, kind of my philosophy lands after listening to Kyle talk about that. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at with it right now. It's kind of we're in the early stages, hypertrophy, and then training the movements. And as we go, we'll start to hit more of the strength and speed.
Do you think that with respect to from a lifting standpoint, do you think that there is a relearning that has to happen from a movement standpoint when you come out of a hypertrophy phase like that? Like, do you think that because that kind of your philosophy is for the most part is to be fast to lift first, do you think that then there's becomes a level of where you've got to relearn that some of that movement stuff to be able to handle some more of the size for the athletes? Did it become, do you feel like any of them become stiff at that point? And then if they're stiffer, I should say, than they were before?
I think it's a progression. I don't think that, with our phase, I mean, we're talking about 8 weeks of hypertrophy. So they're not going to get overly huge in 8 weeks, but they will gain some mass. I think what's good about the hypertrophy phase is you can, in my experience, it's not just it's really kind of slowing down. So like you a lot of eccentric work is really, really good in the hypertrophy phase, time under tension. So if you're, on a 3 second, going on bench press, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000 up, we're just trying to build in as much of that as we can. Same thing with squats.
Right.
I think it's actually better when you can do an isometric hold at the bottom of a squat in a proper position, even with lighter weight, because now we can get that proper depth. And because I don't want them to get into after we test, and they test, and it's like when we're talking about tests like maxing, and they don't get in the proper depth, or they don't have the proper bench technique, or they don't have the proper clean technique. I want them to be kind of really proficient at the end of our hypertrophy season. That way, when we add a lot more weight to the bar, now we're working 85, 90, even 95% sometimes at their 1 rep max. I want them to be at that proper depth. I want to be a true 95% of their 1 rep max on those lifts. And so I don't think we haven't seen any of that as far as a slowdown. In fact, what we see is a progression of not only their strength over time in hypertrophy and size, but also the ability to lift or to perform that lift proficiently, if that makes sense. So now when we throw the weight on the bar, now they are moving fast. They have that explosive range of motion, if that makes sense.
Interesting. And then as far as like, do you feel that do you think that there's a balance between like lift movements for like, developing strength and then applications from a field standpoint? Like, do you integrate some of that stuff within?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Great. That's a great topic, because that's one thing that I've always said, like, well, why are we doing this lift if it's not going to translate to the court or the field for whatever sport? And so all of our athletes kind of typically train the same way. The way that it's different, the sport-specific stuff comes closer to in season. So really every athlete's phases are going to be kind of the same, but it'll be a little bit different for a volleyball player because they jump so much, or a basketball player because they jump so much. So we'll have to limit some of that. But just in general terms, yes. So like if we're doing, wide base crossover, for example, or break plant separate, like I want to make sure their hips, like their hamstrings and glutes, can fire to the point where they can move laterally. They can stop on a dime. They can change that. They can change direction quickly. So yeah, I think a lot of the unilateral work that we do as auxiliary to, a lower body day may be back squat, 5 sets of 8 right now at 70%, which is going to crush them. That's going to crush them. But with that, they'll have a little bit of a rest and a stretch in between, and then they go straight to a plyo, which will be like a box step down lateral drive,
Right.
where they're having to sit in their hip and then do it. And then what we do the next day is we'll do a change of direction drill where we're getting into that same position.
Right.
So we could see them getting into a proper position with their ankles, their knees, and their
Yes.
hips and be able to fire out of that position because of some of that work. We'll do lateral lunges, goblet hold lateral lunges to really build in, because you'll see a lot of kids can't get in a proper position. Their chest is down, their hips are up,
Yep.
their heels off the ground. And so what we do is we utilize our basic movements to build general strength, our auxiliary movements to really kind of drill in that specific strength needed to get in a proper position. And then we apply that into our plyometrics. And so I think that's something that we've kind of incorporated, and that's in every phase: hypertrophy, strength, and power and speed.
Yeah. So it sounds like to me, like to me, like plyos and general movement stuff are obviously, to me, are elements of speed anyway, right?
Yeah.
So those are all elements of speed development, and they're already integrated within, what you're doing in that. Exactly. So it's really not, it's just a focus more on the general strength development.
Yeah.
To get them.
And I'll speak on that just real quickly. So like our day will look like this. We have 3 tiers in a lift. And so if it's a lower day, tier 1 is going to be like back squat. We'll do some sort of, snap down, broad jump, or something like that. We'll have a mobility aspect. So they'll be doing like a hip stretch for the band. And then the 4th one will be a core. We'll do like a plank hold, a little bigs, a Russian twist. I don't like to do a lot of twisting on lower body days when it comes to core. So like that's tier 1. Tier 2 is going to be your unilateral work. So now we're going to be doing lunges or split squat. Maybe it's a tsunami bar, split squat. If you guys haven't heard tsunami bars, go look them up. They're a partner of ours too. Tsunami bar is an oscillating bar. So it creates a lot of force without a lot of weight. So we'll do tsunami bar split squat. We'll do a tsunami bar front squat sometimes. But I do a lot of unilateral work in tier 2. And then I combine that with a very specific plyometric for that day. That plyometric may be a linear kind of plyometric or a lateral plyometric. Sometimes we combine them to where we'll do like a linear plyometric and then change directions and flip our hips. We just got a lot of room to do that. But that's all built in within the workout. And then tier 3 is more of your volume. So now we'll do, a lot more auxiliary type volume in tier 3. And typically that's, more unilateral work, or we're using like, it could be like a hamstring curl, Nordic stuff like that, to where we build that into our entire, day for like lower body. So we kind of build it all in.
Very, very, very interesting stuff. Like it's like the training model, like the whole integration of all of it is really, really interesting. It's interesting how like the different elements come in and how they integrate into the whole entire like picture. Like that's one of the benefits of having obviously a full-time strength coach. Do you use any I don't like 1080 machine stuff or any of like or your version of it, like cables or anything like that, to be able to kind of measure? Do you do any of that kind of output stuff and measuring and kind of what the output is, any of that kind of things within the
So
program?
like when we get into velocity-based training, actually we have some on order. So again, it's my first year, so there's no VBT stuff on campus. So kind of my idea is once we get into our velocity-based training phase, which is that power and speed phase in the summer, we'll have something on a bar to where, they'll be able to, it'll measure the output of the bar based, relative to what we need them to be. So, hey, you got 8 reps and we need to be, over 0.5 meters, on speed. So they can kind of measure that bar speed. That's kind of the idea that I would like to use. There's a lot of those implements out there. You can something can attach to a bar. Heck, there's even a thing where you put on your rack and it thing films the bar.
Yeah.
Really expensive. Perch, I think, makes something like that we've looked into. But a lot of that, if you can't measure, it's really hard to feel. And so if we're really training for power and speed, then we have to be able to measure the bar, because the kids can't feel, when it dips below a certain threshold. And when it dips below a certain threshold on speed, then they're not really training speed anymore. They're training more strength. So yeah, that's a good one for us that we're gonna have to consider. I learned this from Sean Powell at Canon. He did a really, really good job with his VBT stuff.
Yeah, I think the VBT stuff and for measuring the bar movement and how their velocity, and then just from a tracking standpoint, and obviously timing things, squeezes out those incremental gains. But yeah, it's I was curious about that aspect of it. And then last question from a strength coach is the squat. There's two things that I think are like, I'm curious what coaches are doing, because one of the things that I've been like thinking real hard about. Well, one is on the Nordic, the Nordic leg curls. Like I'm personally not I don't see the benefit for the athlete. I'm not talking about a weightlifter. You know what I'm saying? I absolutely see it if you're like a dude trying to get like, thick and stuff like that. I get
A
it.
bodybuilder.
Yeah, bodybuilder, or even if you're like I would say even maybe a weekend warrior athlete, you know what I mean? Because it probably maybe bulletproofs like the hamstrings or something like that. If you're not really going at high velocity, you know what I mean? I could see it from that standpoint. What I do think is like, and I'm just curious if what your thoughts are on, if you've researched it at all. But like a lot of research, like I feel like for athletes that are moving at real high speeds, since it like works one specific thing that I feel like it's juice isn't worth the squeeze on it. And so if you were asking me years ago, I was like much bigger on hamstring curls and all those kind of things, and even more. But I kind of thought back even to my own self from an athletic standpoint, that I thought, it really probably wasn't even necessary, right?
Yeah, I think for us
that one first. So
yeah, I think for us, the way that we can build all this stuff in organizationally is there's just a lot of boxes you have to be able to check. And
right.
so, and I learned this too from Sean Powell. And I was like, well, he would always come in and we'd talk when I was the head football coach, and he'd say, okay, let's build out what we want to do and what you want to see. And so he would have specific things that he would want to check. It'd be like, I want to do some unilateral work, but I really want to work like the posterior chain or something. There's a lot of like boxes that we want to check. So when I go and check these boxes, I'm making sure that I'm taking care of the hamstring. So that may not be a Nordic curl or a banded hamstring curl. Those are two options for doing that. Like we do a lot of single leg RDL. And I feel like
I love those.
That's so big.
That for us, I like that.
RDL in general, man. Like it's just such
you have to feel the hamstring, you have to feel the glute, and it works the stability of the ankle. I think there's a lot of coordination that goes into that. So I actually prefer that over, on the Nordic or the GHD machine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I would actually prefer that, but I think you can get some of the same benefit when you're trying to, like you said, bulletproof the hamstrings. But yeah, I think there's more compound movements that may do more than just a GHD. And look, I'm no expert. I've been doing this just for a few years, but in my experience, it's easier to get 20 kids over there doing. We have a big weight room,
right?
And they got 80 kids in there.
Yeah, efficiency is a key role to it. I mean,
definitely not efficient. There's no doubt it's definitely not efficient.
And I think, Dave, that's something that goes into programming, and guys that understand it like can do that really well with, look, we'd love to, do farmers walks all around the weight room, but do you have access to the ability to do that in a whatever space that you have, or you know what I mean, with the amount of kids in it? Like we would love to be able to do certain things, but when it comes to square footage and bodies in the weight room and time constraints, like you got to make some moves and make some decisions as to what you're going to do.
Up because I always think to myself, like there's a certain part, and I love RDLs, by the way, like one single legged, both leg. I think that they, even though people, I'll put it like this: when you're on Instagram, okay, the Nordic curls look really, really intense. Okay. RDLs, when you're working them, you feel it, but it's not the instant, I call the instant feeling gratification thing that you get necessarily from like but when you're talking about high performing athletes, like you say, you have really fast kids, right? That's when I start to I get much more concerned, right? Like you got a lot of fast dudes that are like firing like this.
Yeah.
The first thing I think is hamstring pulls, right? With
100%.
with RDLs, with Nordic curls, right? So that's the first thing I think, right? Because those guys are so fast, they're moving so quickly, and they're getting so much out of just when you start to sprint, right? So I think that's what's so interesting to me. So I believe exactly kind of what you believe. And then the other one was like on squats. And by the way, I think you explained it really well too. On squats, the other thing that like and Derek knows, I'm like over the years of working with me, I'm like sick on like just I'll watch a million things on something and then and look at the research and then just try to think, like, draw the conclusion. And also, having been a pretty high level athlete myself, like I think back to things that worked for me and didn't. Like I just had this discussion last night with my father, who's been he still coaches, he's 85 years old. And over the years,
renowned track coach, man.
That's awesome.
Still doing it. It's wild. Still doing it. He's a killer. He's a killer.
And he evolved. Like we talk about this all the time. Like when he coached me in high school in the late 80s, early 90s, and I was a very, very high level track athlete too, because I could have went Division I for track too. But I played football instead. So one of the things we used to discuss is that I never maximized my speed where I could have got to, because back in the day, we used to jog, like literally, like our off days was a jog day. Like we'd go out there, jog 2 miles. Like I think about how, and we talk about it because he just had, he was at, after coaching at the high school that I went to for many years, and you have a dad as a coach, so you understand this. Then he went to like a girl, he retired from teaching, went to an old girls' school for almost, 20 years. And he developed a bunch of really high-level sprinters, like at a place that didn't have it, like a bunch of division-level girls sprinters. Wow. And his whole philosophy was obviously everything's max speed, sprint fast, give them rest, like totally different from when I was. He evolved over time, right? And we talk a lot about it because I also have a son, and like I'm developing him. And so we talk a lot about it. And but the last thing we talked about, because he's still a big like strength guy, like power, strength, like he thinks that his philosophy is that helps with speed at the base levels of athletes, meaning middle school, high school athletes, maybe even youth athletes to a certain extent. Obviously, you got to be more careful with youth athletes, but because they're in those developing, and you could develop, and it would lead to speed. I kind of push back on them with the juice isn't worth the squeeze at high levels of squat development, right? And we get in this discussion, and it's funny because I'm an 85, he's an 85-year-old, and I'm a 52-year-old. And obviously you guys are in a younger strengthening, but he's pretty innovative for a guy his age. I'm pretty innovative for a guy my age, right? And so I kind of pushed back, and I said, like, my senior year in college, I had a back injury when I was going to be a redshirt sophomore, and I had to sit out a year. Didn't think I was going to be able to play again, but I came back, and my PT person did an amazing, I think she was ahead of her time. All the development stuff she did with me, and it wasn't the intent to get me back. It was just really, they said you can't play anymore. It was just to kind of, all right, let's get the strength levels and the flexibility and everything back. So, if you want to go run track, or you just want to be able to be a normal person, you'll be okay. Well, what happened was she kind of bulletproofed me to a certain extent. And I came back and played linebacker for the last 2 years. But the only caveat was we all agreed to never squat again. Like we talked with like the doctors to the PT and my strength coach at UConn. We all kind of agreed, like, hey, you know what? It's not worth it for Dave to squat anymore. They had like this really cool for the time, like single leg squat. They have them all now, where you could do like the jump squats on it, machine wise. You could do
Mm.
one-legged. You could do like a bunch of different things that back then that wasn't a norm. We happened to have just gotten one in our facility that back then at UConn, and I used it, and I didn't feel like I had lost anything. But what I did gain was the ability to play, right? Because if I was back squatting, I would have been shot, like literally would have been shot, and it wouldn't have worked out, right? That allowed me at the angles I was able to be able to play. So I kind of over the years was always a big squat guy, but then I started to, like, in the last 5 or 6 years, I started to think, I'm not sure. In 2007 or 8, the USC strength coach at the time talked about, he called it the 300, 400, 500 club, basically. Like, nothing over 300 on the clean, nothing over 400 on the bench, nothing over 500 on the squat. This was a long time ago, but it kind of opened my eyes, right? Like, well, why? Like, why is that the philosophy? What was so his thing was movement of the bar. This is way before all this stuff became kind of in vogue, but movement of the bar he thought was still important, like for speed. And then and this is before he even really had tracking, right? I don't think he was even had any that stuff, but his thing was like movement of the bar, speed, and then juice worth the squeeze. Like, it may have been a hunch at the time, but it kind of opened my eyes, to like. So I say all of that is, where do you think kind of the line is? What do you think is important? Am I wrong? I by the way, you could say I'm wrong if I'm wrong, because my father still pushes back. He says, I'm not sure. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, he still thinks there's such value to the level of the squat, right? Because it's such a multi-muscle exercise. It involves the hamstring, it involves the glutes. He's a big glute guy, and that, like, the glute generates the power and everything else associated with it. So I'll let you go. I gave you the premise, so I'll let you go.
No, it's excellent. No, that's an excellent lead into it, because I think that's an important discussion. But yeah, I think you're 100% right on, is the juice worth the squeeze? And I'm sure there's some sort of like bell curve of like, all right,
Right.
if we continue to increase the squat weight, how much I can produce as far as like power or output, then my speed, athleticism, all that kind of increases. And I'm sure it probably starts to taper off some. And I think as a strength coach in high school, where you're training 14-year-olds to 18-year-olds, you got to be mindful of that. I think there's a lot of validity to, okay, I know some coaches that don't do back squat. They only
Right.
do like split squat, or they only do like front squat, and we do a variation. Like, we'll have a variation throughout we rarely do a back squat in season. We're typically doing our bunch of unilateral work or front squats,
Right.
for a multitude of reasons. One, we don't want to overload their central nervous system and all that stuff. But I will say, I love the 300, the 400, the 500, and I don't know if that'll be totally
Right.
appropriate for high school athletes, because they're probably going to be lower than that.
They're gonna be lower, right?
Exactly. But I love the premise of, all right, if I have an athlete that is squatting 550 pounds, like super freaking slow, what are we training here?
Right.
Like, what is the purpose of that? So yes, I do think there is a time where you cap it. And then once you cap it, then maybe you switch to something else for that particular athlete. But I don't want to do that full sell, because there might be another athlete in there that needs to build a base of strength just to get in a proper athletic position. So like being like a linebacker, for instance, and I know we are never, ever, ever in a bilateral stance when we
Right,
make a
right, right.
tackle or when we're running. But I do think there is something to be said about a general base of strength for a high school athlete, especially a
Right.
younger high school athlete, to be able to build some general foundational movements that then, as they progress and get older, then you could start to specify, okay, now you're only
Yes.
going to be a split squat guy. You're only going to be let's really work on your front squat. But I think for a college athlete, like when I was in high school, when I was 15 years old, I had back surgery because we did back squat. I was the youngest kid that this surgeon had ever performed like micro discectomy on, because I squatted, went out to baseball practice, backhanded a ball, felt like I was cramping in both legs, had a herniated disc, had surgery, missed my freshman year of baseball, and then missed my sophomore year of football. And so I was out. So I've been there. And
Right.
squatting probably did it. Throwing weight on the bar without proper technique or a proper warm up probably did it back in 2002, 2003.
Yep.
Plus me being super tight didn't hurt anybody else, but for me, that was
Which is
not the right
actually a
protocol.
crazy thing at that age to have
Yeah,
to deal with.
it's
'Cause
crazy,
we
man.
understand that
Yeah.
that back issues.
And I
It's
still
just one of
have
those
a
things. Like it's a never ending type of
Well,
thing.
right.
Coach, that's a great point. Yeah, finish that point because I want to.
Yeah, let me just
Yeah,
and so I say all that
that's
to
really
say,
great.
like, I feel like there's some nuance to that because I feel like you got to be able to teach some foundation. Like we had a kid at Cannon, he was a 500 something pound squatter. He could bench, a bunch of weight, probably over 350. He's a running back kid. He's clean close to 300 pounds. It's like, well, why are we going to still push this kid to power clean over 315 when he can hurt a wrist, he can hurt his shoulder? Because power clean is probably as controversial as anything in high school, right?
No doubt. Yeah.
Right. What is the juice worth the squeeze on injuring an elbow, shoulder, whatever for an athlete that doesn't do powerlifting or Olympic lifting as a sport? So I'm 100% with you on that. But I think from us and my philosophy is let's get some foundational principles early and then really start to deep dive into specifying what that particular athlete and what they do well later on.
I think that's a great point. It is so tough because like for a long time, the science kind of was ahead of this stuff. Like when you had the Russian information that was coming out, a lot of this stuff back in the day with like when Nebraska really moved forward, you started to get a lot of stuff in the 60s, 70s, 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
That led to a lot of the stuff that we probably do now, right? Is like foundational. And it was amazing. Like people studied it. And then there got to a certain point because we had so many things happening fast with technology that you couldn't get enough studies out on certain things in order to, or enough people participating, maybe even the bigger issue, right? To get the studies that you need on these kind of things. Like no longer do you have like a communist country like Russia just grabbing all these guinea pigs and just saying we're going to test them all, and not just lifting and sprinting wise, but chemistry wise, right? We're going to test all these guinea pigs to give you all this data, right? Like there'd be probably
here's your cocktail.
International crimes against humanity if you did that.
Get banned from the Olympics.
Yeah, what their kids look like now.
I don't think you don't have it. Maybe like the United States Olympic Committee might be doing some of this stuff, and maybe I'm sure China, which probably keeps it to themselves, they might be doing it with their athletes, but keeping it to themselves. But I think that's what makes it a little bit harder, right? So we're in a little bit of like guinea pig on our own athletes, testing this, does it work? But I do think like what happened to you, what ended up happening to me, like I had signs of that in high school, right? There was definitely signs. Like I remember in before my junior year in high school, I had to sit out of all of our scrimmages because my back was very like I had, who knows what it was. But, like, I had an issue. I had to sit out all my scrimmages because I probably was squatting right through. Like, that's just the way I thought about things. And, I went to this gym, and Derek wouldn't know it, but like, because it was a little bit before your time, but there's this gym called Body Works, and it was like a straight, like, if you're on Instagram, the gym in Maplewood, New Jersey, the, what's it called? The Diamond Gym. You ever heard of it?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
Great videos to watch, by the way.
Okay.
They're crazy. Like they call it the most dangerous gym in the world. Well, this gym still exists that I went to, but it's now in Patterson, New Jersey. But it was over in Elmwood Park, New Jersey. And all these guys were like totally high-level bodybuilders, and they were great people. Like, I loved them. But like, we went in there and we were freaking squat. I mean, so that was the philosophy, right? So I'm sure it had an impact on some of the things that happened to me down the line. It may not have even been what we were doing in college, but what I was doing in high school. And like, I was throwing a lot of weight around, and that it probably got me to a certain point, but then you're right. The diminishing returns after a certain point was not worth it. Right. So that was why I kind of brought it up. And I think it's very interesting because like, I'm starting I experiment even, on myself with these things like one-legged stuff. Like are like where you see some of these guys have the the thing around their waist where they're doing the squats, which is like pushing down on the leg and without like the guy. I don't know if you know him, Derek. Guadango up in Oakland. Freak strength. So one of the interesting things is like the guys that have this whole like strength and conditioning world has expanded out and speed wise like throughout the United States, and a lot of it now coming out of Chicago and then expanding out to where you guys are. A lot of it started back in the 90s with, I don't know if you know the name Bill Parisi, but when Bill Parisi came around with the Parisi Training School, and then we had training facilities back from 2000. I had it from 2003 to 2011, and my partner who was from the Parisi, and I don't know if you know who Joe DeFranco is, but Joe DeFranco, there was this like kind of world in North Jersey that like it all spawned out of like a lot of the speed and strength stuff, which now kind of, I would say phase 2 or 3 would be a lot of those guys out of Chicago with Tony, and then what you guys are starting to do around the country, the younger guys. It's really, really interesting. But like, I remember that whole world of it all. And if you look at Bill, like Derek, if you see what Bill's doing, Bill is kind of jumping back into it, even though he doesn't have like he's aligned with like he's jumping back into it.
Remember, his son is playing college football now. He's getting bored again. Like he's got nothing else to do.
He's teaching a lot of kind of the newer some of the stuff that we're talking about.
He has transitioned and tweaked and kind of come with the times. In that like you know what I mean. Like rather than kind of stand on the pedestal of like this is what it is, this is how you do it. I think a lot of these guys start to see kind of how the new wave, and honestly, look, with social media and the access that we have to information now, I mean, you could type something into AI and you'll have whatever program you want geared to it with 37 firsthand high level references as to why to do this the right way, right, or to why it isn't right. So I think that access has opened up a lot of eyes. Again, to circle back to what you're actually doing, Jamie, like you see a lot of these guys really hiring strength specific guys that know that field to a certain level. It's not just the coach that went and did whatever. The emphasis and the spotlight of how important the off season really is to getting bigger, stronger, faster, all those kind of things. Look, we talk about Tony Holler and Feed the Cats, like, and he's the first one to say it. Like, I've been doing this for years. I just got popular. You know what I'm saying? Like in terms of that. And I think just guys realize, for me personally too, like it's ultimately going to come back to health, because we only know you're as good as your roster is at the end of the season. And with the way they approach it, even for administrators that might not understand sports, they understand that like health is important. So if you take that angle, and which is, I think, a focal point of a lot of this stuff, right? The off season, the preparing, the keeping kids healthy, just with the way parents are in general of like, this is a violent game, but you keep kids healthy. Like there's a lot more focus on this aspect of it.
You know what I'd love for you guys to have on your podcast, because I'm curious, I'd be curious your thoughts if you can get him on, is Chris Corfus.
Okay. Oh, he's the best, bro. Mad scientist, dude. Like
he is, and there's a lot, almost all of his stuff I agree with, but some of it, like maybe, like he tries to be like he's so far on. Like I would argue that he's the guy who is only trying to stay ahead of the curve. You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of how he lived.
Yeah,
right. Like
he a big RPR guy.
He was RPR.
He is RPR.
It's funny because I was big on the RPR.
Jamie, we started the podcast.
I don't buy into the RPR. So he's gone away. By the way, Derek, he's gone away from his RPR stuff. If you noticed, I don't know if you noticed.
He's also the guy that's like, "Hey, I'm going to try."
He's interesting to have on.
This is what I grew up with. We always said, "Coach, man, I need to stretch." Our coach would say, "Hey, man, does that dog stretch before he gets up and chases?"
Yeah. The whole like, does a cheetah stretch before he runs? Like, the whole.
Like, I'm not a cheetah.
Yeah,
exactly.
I've been sitting playing video games all day, Coach. Sorry.
Yeah, like,
it's funny.
And I think that's funny too. But just like like you said, like the focus on that, the focus on the nutrition aspect of things, the sleep aspect of it, all the recovery stuff that goes into the sport itself. It's no longer like game's over. Hey, if it hurts, put ice on it and drink some water, and we'll see you tomorrow. Like this stuff is,
I just think
cold tubs and
a lot of
cupping
it
and
is age. I think it's age appropriate. It's like a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff that is on the cutting edge, I feel like is way more appropriate for an athlete that's already gone through like puberty, like and beyond. Like I hate to say it like that, but it's like we get a
Jamie,
kid that
Dave can talk
has
to you
no
about this
facial
because
hair.
he has a 10, 11-year-old son, right? So he's literally living it right now. And
Right.
and look, he's built the gym in his garage, and his kid's is a high level athlete, right? But to see like that maturation process, right? And we say it all the time, like the hardest thing to grasp or to gauge is that middle school kid to high school, because have they hit puberty yet or have they not? We reference all the time like that.
And there's a specialization aspect to it.
That's huge now.
With my son in his age group, he's playing like a million sports still, right? Like, so even though he has certain sports that are probably his like gonna be where he's gonna go.
You said you had what, Jamie, an 8-year-old?
8-year-old girl and then a 3-year-old boy. Yeah.
So you're like just getting into that.
Just getting into it. Yep. Yeah. And she's into dance.
I got
and
some
all that
years,
stuff,
Dave. I got some years. I'm good.
She's gonna be in sports. But the little boy, he'll be an athlete.
He'll be an athlete.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
So like I learned a lot of things through my own son, like that challenged the way I thought about certain things. You know what I mean? Because he was playing so many sports and like just loved it. And then we were like, whoa, we kind of actually like.
Well, you've dealt with a little bit, some injury things.
Growing. So there were growing issues. So you deal with this in high school too. So you deal with this in high school as well. So in youth athletes, you start to deal with when they start to have bigger growth spurts, right? But then you also deal with it again middle school and high school too. Same thing, right? Until they quote unquote become a man or quote unquote become a woman, right? Like I'm talking from a puberty aspect where the growth plates start to close up completely, which might be like 7 for boys, might be like 17, 18, like towards the end. And girls maybe 15, 16 for the majority. Everybody's different, but like in general, right? And what I learned was like we actually like we're like, yo, you can't play on 3 basketball teams. You can't play. So when he grew, like we used to be like, dude, whatever you want to do play wise, I'll let you play in as many teams you want. As long as we can fit in the schedule, we're like multi-sport, like do whatever you want. You know what I mean? And we would integrate a little bit of training here and there where we could. But he was young. And then at 9 years old, he went from 4'8" to 5 feet. Like,
wow.
And all the things.
And he's built. He's
good and
built.
bad that came along with that, right? Good and bad that came along with that. I guess maybe it was like 9.5. All the good and bad that went along with that, which was basically he had developed Seavers, okay, which a lot of middle school athletes and high school athletes can get either on a version of it on the knee, which I think is Osgood Slaughter's, or in the heel, which is Seavers, right? And those are like such important parts to sprinting and running, right? Obviously, and jumping and all that stuff and lifting. So I was like, whoa, like I like we had to rethink things. Like, you know, he was in his a boot for a month with that. And when we came back, you know, we were told, oh, he come back, he'll be right back to where he was. No, he wasn't. Like his strength level in that foot were significantly, he almost could not push off. Like he was not hurting anymore per se, but he couldn't push off, right? And he didn't have the strength. So I was like, wow, I really got to figure out how to get him involved and do strength stuff with him, right? So
like from a rehab standpoint, yeah.
It was. So he went to rehab. Like all football season, he was playing, he was in rehab. That was huge. That was phenomenal. And there's a place here, Rip, this guy, actually he was
Bobby.
Parisi disciple, but his wife runs the physical therapy.
He was a high level javelin thrower.
Javelin football. He played football, I think, at Mama too.
Yep.
But he was a high level javelin thrower. But he so anyway, so he did that. Then it was up to me right after that part. So I had to really so I started developing the strengthening part, the movement stuff. And what was interesting is what your point is, age appropriation. Like Chris Corfus's stuff, which he really is focused on the high level people with this, actually applied to my 10-year-old because it was like some, things that you would say are fine tuning for the high level sprinter or football player, quote unquote. But the ankle work, the footwork stuff, the bouncy work stuff really actually applied to his situation because he had lost so much lower leg strength. Okay. And it was really interesting. So I started doing it. We really started a lot at the conclusion of football season because you're getting beat up in football. So there's almost so much we could do. But in basketball season, we've kind of worked through it all. And, in basketball, you're playing a lot of games, you have practices, but we've worked through it with speed and all. And I can't, in the 3 months, it's amazing. He's not near where he needs to be, but it's amazing as to what has happened. He went from zero bounciness. Foot would be like, if he was to sprint, the heel would go back down in order to go. That's like your first sign, right?
Yep.
There's a lot of weakness there. Go right back down. He couldn't believe how slow he was. This was a kid who was very, very fast. Couldn't believe how slow he was. Now he was bigger, so you got to, in the age things, your body has to kind of relearn to do certain things, unfortunately, but that's just how it is as you go through each stage of development as a kid. For some kids, not every kid, but for some kids. And so he couldn't do it. But now we got him back. So now we see in the bounce, I go to Lifetime Fitness. They have this skill mill treadmill that we use. And then we use, they have this, I don't know what this treadmill costs, but only adults are on it, but we use it for pushing a version of, you can push the sled on it. You can add it you have a power, and it's worked out really great, right? We're doing all these different things on it, but incorporated with this strength training. But your point is really correct. Age appropriate and growth development appropriate. That's the hardest thing for your job is growth development. They could be 14. This 14-year-old could be like an 18-year-old.
Yep.
And this 14-year-old could be like an 11-year-old.
And you got 80 kids in there.
And you got 80 kids in there. And you all of a sudden, one of them comes to you and, you're like, oh, my God, this person's strength is so – it's not that he's not it could be a great athlete, but his physical development phase is so low. I got to address this while this guy's a man and he's putting more weight on the bar.
Yeah, that's a great point. We'll have a kid in there that is a rising sophomore, right? That's maybe came to us late. You never know. He doesn't know how to power clean. But we also have a rising senior that's, pushing okay, the kid's going to power clean 315 pounds, so and they're in the same class. Right. So obviously we have them at different areas, but you have to be able to, I guess, differentiate what you do in there. We'll have to start with the other kid, the younger kid off on a progression, and then the other kid we might have to say, man, we don't need you doing more than 85% of your one rep max. So you definitely have to have that in mind, plus all the other 78 kids that could be in there. And then let alone if you're in a place where it has different sports, different phases. So my hat's off to all the strength conditioning coaches in high school, because I think that's the hardest job. I think if you want to go get specific work, I think that's an excellent opportunity to go get some extra speed work or go get some extra one-on-one time with a trainer outside of it.
Right.
But you know what I mean? I think that's where you can get that specific work in and try to supplement maybe something that your athlete needs. So your son may be in I couldn't provide your son that proper, programming in class. That would have to be something that you guys have to go out and get in addition to. And we've actually done that. Hey man, you need to go see a speed trainer. We're not going to be able to get as much volume in this 90-minute block. You need to go see a speed trainer. You need, it's like quarterback training. I coach quarterbacks. I don't have the time right now to take all my quarterbacks out and do training on the weekends. Go see a quarterback trainer. Here's some guys that I like. It's the same thing there. And I just think that's a like from your standpoint, you're doing the right thing as a parent and trying to address specific needs for your kid. And I think I would say the same thing for our guys, or go see the athletic trainer. And I'll say this at Cannon, they did a really good job of having a head strength coach, and then the assistant strength coach would also be the rehab facilitator.
That's
So
big.
they would work hand in hand, and then like you coming off an ACL or
Just
whatever
that
it is.
communication in general, right?
Yes. So I think all those are really, really good to have.
How many times are we dealing with the?
You guys have that. I
yeah.
think that's right. The head.
Other than that,
strength
it's all
coach-
hearsay.
Right. The head strength coach is in charge of overall development, right? And like, how do we get all these kids to the certain base levels that we need to have to play their sport, right? And this assistant is over here, and he's taking these 4 or 5 people that are recovering, or maybe they have some issues coming out of a season or into whatever.
Or maybe they're elite. Maybe they're an elite track, runner, and they need something different than the generic, what everybody else is getting. Like they need to be preparing for, collegiate track in 6 months. That
right,
kind of thing.
right. They're running 10-2. They're a different person, different cat.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a great point, and I think that's and then your other point, which is really good. The kids are going to go elsewhere if they think something might be lacking, right?
Mhm.
Like, and you're understanding that, hey, this is what we're gonna be able to do for you. And do you like, even like to coaches, do you say, hey, listen, because a lot of coaches fight against this, right? And I think it's a mistake to fight against it. I think what's a better way to do it is figure out who you like and who you can recommend and who you trust that will work with you as much as they can. I get it. Like, nothing is perfect. It's a tough world from that standpoint. And not everybody has the same financial capabilities, right? But and you, in those cases, you might say, hey, here's a workout you could do on your own. Take
Correct.
this time to do some of this, right? You can't go to somebody. But do you think it's important for coaches to build relationships with some of these outside sources so you can work together as much as humanly possible so they can get the best out of the athlete as a whole?
Great question. I think that's a big one that a lot of strength coaches feel attacked in some ways, when they are addressed with this, especially from like a parent. So like, for us, we have our parent meeting coming up in a couple weeks. And so I'm going to be addressing the parents on what we do for them in the weight room. So this is what we provide in the weight room year round. If you have any questions beyond this, please come talk to me about your specific needs. We can attempt to address those in class. And if you are thinking about getting some extra work, here's the only concern that I have. One is, what is that volume going to look like? So if we are, on a 3x2, or we're lifting 3 times a week, and then we are, sprinting twice a week, are you then going to a sprint coach like after that session and then look at we need to be able to work together. And I think in my case, at the school that I'm at, we don't have a lot of students that do get a lot of supplemental work. But when I was at Cannon, a private school, obviously parents are in a situation where they're going to try to pull out all the stops for their kids. And that does butt heads with your strength staff, because we feel like we do have a robust strength and conditioning staff. We have like usually a head strength coach and assistant strength coach. We have 2 athletic trainers. We have all kinds of interns from the local, college there. But yeah, I mean, I think you just got to be able to communicate with the parents and then be able to work with them. And that's just a hard thing. That's school to school. I'm in a good place where we are pretty much providing 99% of their programming.
Very difficult. Even if that communication is wide open, it's still going to be sometimes a very fine line between parent, trainer, strength coach, actual coach, kid themselves, right?
I think trainers also. Go ahead, Derek.
No. That's kind of where it's at. I'm just to have all of that stuff in line, because how many times do you get, hey, I have a doctor's note from this guy, or this my physical therapist said this, or hey, just even the fact of like, hey, I just came in, I did this workout, but I'm going to my trainer tonight, and now you're squatting 2 times in a day, or whatever it is. Like, that open line of communication is so important, and that comfort to be that open.
Should reach out too, in my opinion. So if you're running a business, right? Like, think about it from a business standpoint. This is the way I think about a lot of things too. If I'm running a business and I'm gonna go and work with a kid, either whatever it is, position wise, speed wise, whatever it is, and he has a program at his school, I would want to know if I'm overlapping. So if a player says, "Hey, I do this, this, and this in my school," I would like to have, I think it should be better communication, like you're talking about, between the trainers and the strength staff. And I think both groups should put more of their ego aside. It's not
Agreed.
just
100% for the betterment of the athlete.
because the athlete can, because it's going to have, because otherwise what happens is both operate in a vacuum. Okay. And when they both operate in a vacuum, kids get injured. Right.
Correct.
So, and I think ultimately that detracts. And I think it's not, I'm not saying it's an easy thing, right? Because
No.
coaches being who they are, there's always, I'm the smartest man in the room. Everybody thinks they're the smartest guy in the room, but it's really about getting a common ground, right? Like it's like my whole thing when they go to speed training, like, and Derek knows, like there are people that don't talk to me anymore because I'm so highly critical on these shows, but on certain things. But I can't stand it when I see 20 guys in a group. If you're paying, okay. Now I know strength conditioning wise, you have 150 million kids in your school. You got to have 80 guys in there. I understand. And you do a great job of programming it. That's a totally different situation. When I'm paying to come to you, I should not have 20 kids in my group.
There should be a max. There should be like a cap on how many can be trained.
It becomes a money thing, obviously.
Oh,
right?
100%.
Of course. You're not going to turn down a client that's going to be paying you
and
because
I get it because I have to pay this expenses for my facility. This is what they're charging me for rent in order for me to get. I understand financially from a business standpoint what kind of happens. Okay, they start doing the math, and I get it, but you really, in order to be what I would call a worthwhile going to an outside trainer, you have to have people in smaller groups, and you have to be able to customize a certain level of the training to the athlete. Otherwise, what is the point? Like, to me, what is the point? Because I could go, honestly, I just say it, just go work with your dad, dude. Like, otherwise, just go work with your dad and your mom. Like, because they're going to customize. Believe it or not, this sounds crazy, okay? And this might piss you off, Derek, as a coach, but they know what their kid is a little bit, right? If they have any knowledge at all, I'd rather get it from you, like Coach Bolton.
I'd like to believe that. I really would. Like
I'm saying, this is where the coaches can communicate with this. I think part of the modern thing, really, where coaches can step up is Coach Bolton. Listen, I don't want to put him in a speed group with 30 other kids. Can you hand me some things that you think I could do? Because I know that you have a lot of athletes you got to work with. A few things that I could do once or twice a week that might help him.
That would be huge on like inroads with that coach too. I mean, I think kind of putting that trust into the coach to program for you, and now there's not like
just the level of involvement for you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. I think it gets misconstrued a lot.
Yeah, you guys have great facilities, obviously, and those are things that, like, you could see that, and they're going to hire. In what's nice about South Carolina, Georgia, Texas, and maybe some of the other places that Alabama maybe does it too. You guys are full time, right? So one of the nice things about that is I do think parents start to gain a trust over time on that, because you are a full time person. That is your job, and they can feel more, if they don't have it on the outside. Like, that's my advice to parents. Like, if you show up to a class and there's 20 kids there, okay, if you just want them to get volume for some whatever reason, okay, fine, right? Like, I get it. But if you want them to if you're going there to get actual custom development, if there's 20 people in a class, if you have a strength and conditioning coach that you trust, go to them and say, is there some programming that I can do, versus doing something blindly, right? Like blindly doing something, and you think you throw your kid in this class, he's going to get better. And then all of a sudden, I'm not even talking about the money aspect. All of a sudden, they're doing all this stuff and they get hurt, right? And you're like, you're pointing a lot of times they end up pointing the finger at the school, which is not correct. Okay, they point the finger at the school, but it's because they've overloaded them, right?
Correct.
And it's important to understand that, like, if you feel like you need more, if you think you got a good strength and conditioning coach, go to them, ask them, are they
Use
knowledgeable?
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
I
know
would
what
just,
else?
it's like a teacher. I mean, like you're struggling in Spanish. Okay. Well, or, maybe you're an elite Spanish speaker. Okay. Are there things that you can do? Like the school part should serve if you're at a good place. I'm not saying every place is like this. You might not be at a place with a strength coach that's full time, but let's say you are full-time strength coach. They handle all the athletes. If there's supplemental things that you need to do from a tutoring standpoint, yes, I'd say go to the Spanish teacher and ask, hey, is there something else that I can work on? What are my weaknesses that you see? Can I work on these? Or, I might not be doing enough to challenge myself. Are there things that I could do outside that can work with our current programming? I would say the same thing for any athletics. It's like use your resources first and then supplement outside of that. But don't like take a class and then use the tutor as the main source of information and then blame it on the class teacher for doing their job. Like that there's got to be a priority there. So I agree with that.
Great point. Really awesome having you on. Hopefully it was as enjoyable
Absolutely.
as as you thought it would be. Again, just like Coach, we could talk to you forever about it, because there is so many aspects to it, and I'd love to see younger guys like yourself and really like trying to figure all these things out and trying to help, because it's important, because that I really think, like, there's things from old school that are really great, but there are things that can be tweaked now that can really help the athlete get a lot better. And I think that those things are important for the development. And I think a lot of, guys like yourself who went right into coaching, like, are pushing that envelope, which I think is really, really cool. Me and Derek have talked about this a lot. Like, it's like, it wasn't the frame of thinking that I always thought, like, yeah, you had to be a high level athlete in order to be a high level coach and all those kind of things. And a lot of the younger coaches have pushed that envelope, and I love it. Like, I love it that, like, coach is a profession. Coaching is a profession. And just like being, athletes could be professional athletes or high level athletes, coaching is a separate and different profession. I think that's a very important thing for athletes to understand. Yes, they can yes, a high level athlete can become a phenomenal coach. No doubt there are things that they learn that they apprentice on, but it's important for athletes to understand that coach is a profession, and there are people that have trained themselves on this stuff that may know a lot more than someone who was a high professional level athlete, because they're in the weeds of this, and they're learning and researching it. So can't thank you enough for coming on today, Coach.
Well said, Coach. And I appreciate you guys having me on. It's been super enjoyable being on the other side of this. And but man, I hopefully get to talk again soon, and we'll see you guys around. But thank you so much.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks,
a great
Coach.
day, man.
We'll have to have you back on to break down some X's and O's offensively. We'll maybe
Let's do
run
it.
through some clips and whatnot.
Let's do it. I'd love to.
All right,
Sounds
man.
good to
Enjoy.
me.
Go shovel.
Will do. See you guys.
Excellent stuff. I know we got to jump on, right?
Yeah, we'll roll with whenever you get situated and
I'm just
whatnot.
going to bathroom.
Yeah, it's cool. It's gonna be a good. I mean, we had him on when he was a newly hired young puppy of a head coach, and now he's gone through a couple years of stuff, bud. So this should be it should be a good one.
It should be good. This
That was awesome, by the way.
Yeah, it was awesome. It helped me frame, because I was listen. He answered some really, which I think a lot of people would
About
have
the programming.
Yeah, because my mind's coming clear on some of this stuff. Like, really, really, honestly, these podcasts. I mean, you're a huge part to thank with this. Like, these podcasts and stuff. I'm still coaching, obviously, but on the youth level.
But it's allowing us to, like, talk to people and get perspectives that we wouldn't normally get.
You get siloed otherwise, right? You get siloed.
Well, you stay in your little
vacuum,
wherever we are, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and now this is, I mean, that shit's awesome. I mean, God damn, I'd love to be a full-time strength coach out of high school, bro. Like,
Listen, my father last night was talking to me about, he's like, we were talking about the national championship game too. And he's like, oh, this Malachi, right? And I said, oh, we had his high school coach on. So he was talking about Malachi. What's Malachi's last name?
yeah, Tony.
Tony. And he was talking about like what his father did with him, and then what he played for. And I was just telling him the story. But that's what this podcast, like my father's just one of these people that, like, obviously, and he reads and he does he's constantly in. He's still coach, but he just likes to read on this stuff. Just likes to learn.
To do now we have access to so much, dude. We could read forever. Like you said, you get caught in a rabbit hole, or your algorithm goes a certain way, dude.
He goes on a computer. For him, he's old. He goes on a computer and goes.
Shit, he probably still gets like a hard paper.
Well, no, he does. He reads books and stuff. But like when he looks up stuff on like Malachi Tony, I'm sure he's doing a Google search. He ain't using.
Of course, but like, dude, you introduce him to like a freaking AI site that's gonna help him. Like, holy shit, dude,
if I show him how to use that, he might live on that thing. So like, does this give me the right information? I'm like, most of the time it is right.
So
eventually, it's probably gonna give it to you right almost all the time, but 99.9%.
100%.
Right now, it's probably like 97%, but
which is a lot better than most.
Yeah, which is a lot better than most of the stuff, and it's really, really interesting. But I find it fascinating. In listen, if my kid didn't get injured, which I maybe wouldn't have researched this stuff as much, but now I'm like, wow, like I'm
gotta look at like
I'm in the Chris Corfus rabbit hole. By the way, I find him humorous. And that some of his stuff, some stuff, like he's thrown out stuff that he believed in. Like if you watch him his old videos, like he's thrown out things.
And that's, I think, the evolution of, to me, that's I look at that as it's a bonus. Like that makes you a better coach or a better whatever, because you're admitting, yes, I did things this way, but I've come to the conclusion that like this is maybe better, and now I'm gonna, you know what I mean? Like they own it. They don't like, oh well, like they don't. They take ownership of what it was that, like, even Nick Saban said, like, I've changed some outlooks on certain things of, whether it's, I used to think guys needed to be squared up in a back pedal. And then I had a guy that was able to do it on a tilt, turn and run. And guess what? Now they can do both. You know what I mean? Like, so even the greats, that's part of, the evolution of getting better at it and caring about your craft. Like if you care enough, you'll look at
Nick Saban's, I guess what do you call it? Like almost like a shuffle, but
yes, it's like almost like it's like a shuffle bail type thing, or like a shimmy almost.
It's amazing because in the 90s we had this guy Greg Williams who was our DB coach, and he believed in that. Okay, he coached at a lot of places, North Carolina, Georgia, everywhere.
Right. Whereas most people didn't, and it was like that was like. No,
he was very successful with it at UConn, and then Skip Holtz came in, and obviously that staff got fired.
Right.
And new coach Nick Rapone, who coached a million years in the NFL. I'd be curious if he was a backpedal guy, but I'm curious at the end of his career if he was still a backpedal.
I was always a backpedal guy. I changed that.
Right. And now, but who changed my mind? I hate pointing to it, but sometimes a great athlete,
yes,
Anthony Pomo changed my mind on the back pedal. So I was his DB coach, and he wanted to be turned in, and he wanted to shuffle, right? And I'm like, and then I would watch. He said I could see everything. He said I'm fast enough. I could just shuffle, and I'm fast enough to turn and run.
And you're like, all right, well, it works. And that takes a lot. But that takes a lot to kind of allow a guy to do that. You know what I mean? Like,
I was like, do whatever you think will make you play better. And the other guys were like so mad at me. I'm like, dude, why should we mess with him? He's the fastest kid. And then the other guys, they were like, if I'm more comfortable doing it, can I do it? I said, well, let's see how you turn your hips.
See how it works.
If you could do it, do it. Like if you can't do it, like if you think your body, if you feel like you could play better, this other way, I'll teach it to you whatever way you want to play. So it was the first time in my life I let the DBs, dude, guys were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Whatever makes them make plays, dude." Like, if this dude likes being square and backpedaling, listen, I was originally, and I definitely got to go. I was originally the Ohio State under Tressel, okay, played zone inside, okay? It was crazy. I actually loved it, and I played that for a while. And then I was like, Pomo kind of changed my mind with that, and I was like, no, let me cut the man in half, or kind of deal. If I could figure out one way, like one foot this way, the other foot the other way, and play that open, like kind of what Nick Saban teaches. And I was like, okay, but it's important that like you do those kind of things because it helps you be better. And it helps the athlete. The biggest thing is whatever helps the athlete play their maximum ability.
Right. I'm holding this guy back because of what? Because of what I believe in.
Philosophy.
If he can do it and get it done, come on. Let's get
right.
it.
And when I showed part of it was like Pomo hated the Ohio State thing, hated it. And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. What do I do? Like I was like, you know what? Like I could see he would be like, I can't do this, and he showed it to me. And he was a very cerebral kid. By the way, he's got kids supposedly now. He has kids that are, I think, my kids' age, or supposedly are unbelievable athletes.
I mean,
obviously. Supposedly are like girls and boys that are supposedly, maybe they live in Saddlebrook. I think maybe they live in Saddlebrook. But supposedly are like, from, I don't know, what's been told to me, they are like him. Supposedly. So, his sister was a great athlete. Dude, I coached him in track. His sister won the long jump in the state group championships. Anthony won the long jump and the 100-meter dash. And then I had a triple jumper, this kid, Brian Wiseman, who also played football for me, win the triple jump in the same meet. I don't know if too many people in Bergen County ever coached
probably like
that.
I've never, yeah.
In the same state group championship, I had the triple jump champ, a boy, the long jump champ, the 100-meter champ. They're all my guys and girls. And then the girl long jump champ. And then my second girl was fourth in the long jump. And then Anthony was fourth in the triple jump in that meet. All in the same meet. And 1 year later, I think the very next year I was no longer coaching. No, one more year I was no longer coaching track after that. But that was I was like really just in the beginning. I had the jumping explosion part. I won't say the sprinting part yet completely figured, but I had the jumping explosion part figured out back then. I had it figured out because it was all Anthony Pomo. He would get too sore. He would get too. You know what time we were done with jump practice? We would get in there at 3:00. My father still did his calisthenic warm up that he did from. I don't know if he did it when he was in. I bet he did it in Holy Angels, but still did it back in whatever he was doing when I was in high school. They still did the same warm up. It was like 15 minutes long, 10 minutes long, and I would get Anthony in those jumpers at 3:15. They were home by 4.
Crazy.
45 minutes they would work out, and they were home. And it was people. The coaches were like, "You guys, you're leaving?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm leaving." It would be like 4:10. See you guys tomorrow. And they're like, "Oh, come on, are they going to be any good?" I'm like, "Good." I'm like, they're going to win everything. They're like these guys. They're like they could bound. They could do. I wish I filmed our stuff back then. That's the only thing that kicks me because
that wasn't a thing though, bro.
I wish I filmed it because what we were doing, like we used to triple jump into high jump mats. We used to do all these things in the mats. We used to use boxes to high. By the way, I had the best high jumper as well. I had a high jumper that went 6'5".
You missed your calling, buddy.
I had a high jumper. I really understood the jumping and explosion thing, like very quickly. I really, I don't know why it clicked. Like sprinting took more time, even though I had great sprinters. But
that always helps.
Yeah, I understood that they need to recover. That was the thing I understood quickly. All right, let's go. I don't want to hold your cousin. I'm sorry.
Yeah, good. You'll talk. I'll jump on. I'll jump on now.
Jump on, and I'll be right back. I'm
Yep.
just going to the bathroom.
All right. Yep.